Out of the cities is my message at this time. Be assured that the call is for our people to locate miles away from the large cities. That was penned in 1906. And if there was ever a time to be out of large cities, it most certainly is today. Look, people in the cities always fared worse than people in the country during economic collapses or world wars. The last place you want to be in is a city when such things happen. Well, I said I'd discuss the spiritual side of the economic collapse, but before I do, I need to touch on the Social Security in 2017 again. I don't think I was real clear. Social Security is going negative next year. That doesn't mean the government's all of a sudden going to collapse because they don't have that money. What it is kind of a marker per se. It shows we've reached a point of no return, or some people say we've crossed the Rubicon. See, we're getting to the point where the government's paying out more than they can bring in. Now, of course, they've done this on many other things. That's why we have the debt to begin with. But now it's going to start affecting the people personally. And people will lose faith in the government. And remember what I said. The dollar does not collapse because of hyperinflation. The dollar will ultimately collapse because of a lack of faith or trust in the government. And we can already see this starting to happen. Why do you think Trump is so popular? It's simply that he is seen as an outsider, an anti-establishment guy. People are fed up with both parties. They're fed up with the lies from both parties. They don't see much difference in either party. Both parties just spend more and never cut the waste of government. But you see, government never sees themselves as a problem. They see you as a problem. When you talk about cutting government waste, they think, well, okay, we can cut welfare, we can cut Social Security, we can cut Medicare, we can cut your benefits, but they will never think, okay, we can cut 80% of the government workforce. Well, that most certainly is not going to happen because their cousin Billy Bob and Bobby Lou that they've hired in there will get upset. So the government is never going to shrink in size like they need to do. No, they never see themselves as a problem. So ultimately what happens is the government's paying out way more than it can bring in no matter what it does, no matter how high the taxes go or no matter how much money they confiscate. Eventually it all collapses. Eventually you reach peak debt, which I think we're there. And this all comes crushing down. We've seen this in this country on a local level. Look at Detroit. Look at what happened there. Detroit, the very thing that happened to Detroit is what's happening to the whole United States. It was actually happening worldwide. Google some pictures of Detroit before and after. The whole picture is like Detroit 2009, Detroit 2013. Whole neighborhoods are gone. They're just gone. Some of these places are fields now where a whole neighborhood used to be. A whole suburb used to be there. Now it's a field. Or they'll have pictures of these houses are vacant. Some houses weren't bad. We're talking mostly poor, but also middle class. Many middle class neighborhoods where people live their whole life. These people have been there. Some were born in these homes. Some people bought it when they were young. They plan to stay there forever. And now it's just all gone. And it's all gone because of a government that cannot restrain its spending. Basically, a government that reached a point of no return. They had no way of getting out of the mess they had created over the past several decades, just like we see the federal government doing today. But now, like I've said before, this isn't going to happen suddenly this year. It's not going to happen suddenly next year. Just like it didn't all of a sudden happen overnight in Detroit. However, most people closed their eyes and ears to the signs and they basically got caught unaware. But you see, they probably said, well, the government won't let things like that happen here. This is Detroit. Detroit won't collapse. I mean, it's Detroit. Of course, things are bad and we don't know where the money's going to come from, but you know, this is Detroit in the United States of America. Such things can't happen here. And, you know, we think that way. It's very hard for us to think there could really be a nationwide collapse like this or a worldwide collapse. And yet it happened in Detroit. And it's happening in China today. This is what the G20 summit was all about. Trying to stop the collapse that's going on in China. And it's happening in Europe right now. It's happened in uh, Italy already, Greece, Spain, on and on. The question is, how bad is it going to get and how soon? Those are the things we can't answer. And this leads me back to the spiritual aspect of the economic collapse. I think a lot of Adventists get caught up in the fear mongering that's going on today. The crowd, like the Alex Jones crowd, where the world is ending every single day. Or there's even a lot of Adventist pastors that preach like you're going to go to bed tonight and wake up tomorrow with the Sunday law. But look, there are things we know if we just actually study. We need to not get caught up in the craziness of today, not in the fear mongering, not make rash decisions. Things have been spelled out for us so that we can watch for the signs. One thing we clearly know is that national ruin follows national apostasy. It's not the other way around. So what that means is the country's not going to totally collapse in an economic crisis and everything fall apart before there's a Sunday law. That's not how it's going to work. Now look, we can have a pretty severe depression. We had depression before, right? And there was no Sunday law. So we can have a severe depression, and that's still not national ruin. We could work our way out of this depression, and life could go on for a few more years. But at some point, there will be a Sunday law, and then it's a national ruin. This is not something a nation comes out of. It's all over. So unless a Sunday law is passed during this collapse is not going to end this country. So this is one thing we clearly know. This is one thing we should understand as Adventists, and we should not get caught up in some of the other craziness that's being presented out there. And then the other thing is the Sunday law itself. There's a lot of sermons now. Of course, there are going to be a lot of sermons. When you have the way things are today, you're going to have more pastors, conservative pastors, talking about everything and trying to tie it into where a Sunday law is coming. But look, you're not going to go to bed at night and wake up the next day with a Sunday law. The Pope's not going to come down to Congress someday and say, I want a Sunday law, and they're going to pass it that night. It's not going to happen this way. We have clear counsel of how this is going to work out. So let me read something from Review and Herald 1908. You can find this in A Great Controversy as well. Chapter 36, but I just thought the wording here was a little better. And anyway, this is from Review and Herald. Men of position and reputation will join with the lawless and the vile to take counsel against the people of God. Wealth, genius, education will combine to cover them with contempt. Persecuting rulers, ministers, and church members will conspire against them. With voice and pen, by boasts, threats, and ridicule, they will seek to overthrow their faith. By false representations and angry appeals, they will stir up the passions of the people. Not having a thus saith the Scriptures to bring against the advocates of the Bible Sabbath, they will resort to oppressive enactments to supply the lack. To secure popularity and patronage, legislators will yield to the demand for Sunday laws. So you see, this is a clear process that will work out before your very eyes. It's not something that's going to all of a sudden happen in a day. And it's the people that call for the Sunday law. This is something you'll see in society. We're not there yet. Society today is not going to call for a Sunday law. Sure, there are people here and there that's talking about it in Congress, and you probably get the newsletters in the mail like I do, where they always want to point out these people. But by and far, the mass of Americans are not going to call for Sunday law anytime soon unless something drastic happens. Now, an economic crisis could be the catalyst for such a thing. World War III could certainly be a catalyst for such a thing. But I'll be honest here, I just don't know how it's going to work out. And what I mean is, it seems impossible to me that we can even survive through a Sunday law today with how with how society is today. Now think about this for a minute. In Ellen White's day, they were much more prepared for a Sunday law or for an economic collapse than we are. Look, they already were used to keeping food stored in their cellar. This is the way they lived day by day. They always had a big supply of food that they would can and put aside. You know, we've gotten easy. We've gotten uh, or lazy, or whatever you want to call it, life of ease today, where people just think, well, I'll just run to the grocery store this week and next week, or every other day, some people even do. And we live like that. But back 100 years ago, that's not how they lived. So they were more prepared for these things. I know you can read stories of people who went to the stores back then too, but generally speaking, society was much more prepared back then. Um, Look, they weren't dependent on electricity like we are today. They had outhouses. They didn't worry about running water. They could pump the water if they needed to, or as many people were doing still. They didn't have to worry if their car broke down. They had to have some supercomputer to fix it. It was as a horse and a wagon, and they could pretty much do most of the wagon repairs themselves. So you see, we are ill prepared compared to what they were over 100 years ago, and sometimes I wonder if God might not just set society back about 100 years or so we can survive an actual Sunday law. If you have a severe enough collapse and you have World War III, society could be set back quite a bit. Sometimes I wonder if that maybe won't happen, or maybe will be the way it does happen. But these are all unknowns, and we can't worry about the unknowns. Ellen White said we shouldn't make a time of trouble before the time of trouble, and I'm afraid a lot of Adventists are doing that. We're making rash decisions because we're getting scared by what we see. And look, it's getting scary out there. People are getting crazy. Society is getting angry. Look how many shootings took place last year. And really, society is getting out of control. And I believe we'll see more and more of that. But all these are birthing pains. We have to keep this in mind. These are birthing pains. And they're signs, sure. But once we get down to the last stages, you'll definitely know it's happening. And I think until we get there, until we have sure signs, until things like a serious talk about Sunday law, and where they're like we read the quote we read, until some of that happens, we need to just recognize it for what it is, and that is a government who's overspent is collapsing. And we can't say 100% the outcome of this collapse. It could be simply, like I said before, we go into very bad depression and then we come back out of it. I mean, at some point they are going to pass a Sunday law, but we don't know if that's going to come out of this or not. So we just have to prepare for what we know. And then we need to be prayerful. We have to not drag our feet if the Lord's trying to lead us somewhere. If He's wanting us to get out into a country setting, don't drag your feet. And also ask Him to open the door if you're not in a country setting yet. And I believe He'll open the door faster than you think. A lot of people think, well, that's impossible. I can't leave my job here. I can't leave what we have here. But I believe if you get serious, the door will open that you didn't think could open. On the other hand, we shouldn't get ahead of the Lord and rush out into some wilderness setting thinking that's where we need to be right now. If you're able to do that, great. I mean, I would like to move out to some wilderness place, but that's not in the cards right now. That's probably a pagan saying, isn't it? Not in the cards right now. Anyway, you know what I mean. Ellen White was clear that you leave the cities and move to the smaller towns and villages in preparation for the remote areas. I think that's where we should be right now, is preparation for the remote areas. And that's all I really wanted to say about this. I know I didn't go a lot into the spiritual aspect, but I want to keep it short because I want to address the main issue of how some people are making rash decisions and getting unfocused. And we need to remember what the spirit of prophecy has told us, and just trust in that and believe in that, and not read more into things than are there. I mean, yes, I feel it. You feel it. The things are these are definitely birthing pains. Things are definitely winding down. But it might take longer than we expect here. And so I just want to make sure we recognize that and we watch for the true signs, the signs that will definitely wake us up to when the end is near. I think I'll leave it there. I have a lot more things to talk about all this economic crisis stuff, but I don't know that I'll put them on here. Um, if you have questions, comments, let me know. I certainly don't know everything. I certainly haven't figured everything out. I'm just trying to figure out this mess like all of you are doing. I think I've been fortunate enough to have a little time and to meet a couple people to figure some of this stuff out. And I think the Lord guided me to them or something, and so I could understand really what's going on here. I mean, my feeling is things are going to get bad, but things are going to get last longer than we would really like.